Good morning, everybody. I think that's probably enough waiting for those that are still joining. We've got a bunch of people who've already joined, so we'll crack on. 2 minutes past 10 from where I am in Queensland today. Could be noon, I guess, in New Zealand, or who knows when in the US. My name's Randall Cameron. I'm the Managing Director for Mobile Mentor here in Australia, and we thought we'd do a bit of a quick fire update about what's in store for iOS 13 this time of year. Is quite active for us to make sure that our managed customers are up to date, and hopefully you can grab some information. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please put them into the Q&A chat session, and we'll carve out plenty of time at the end to hopefully answer them on the fly for you. If not, we can come back to you at a later time. Let's crack on. So we're going to read straight into it. There are now, with iOS 13, going to be 3 device enrolment options. Starting with the name change to start with, which is commonly referred to at the moment as DEP, which was the Device Enrolment Program, has turned into Automated Device Enrolment. So it is an extension of the DEP program. Not too many changes, some doubling down on it probably is a better word for it. And obviously with that enrolment process that's now been in place for quite a few years, you can have the optional device management agent on the device, or you can actually go agentless and actually have just an enrolment experience without the agent. The device enrolment is the standard one that was the first one available that dates back to, I think, iOS 4, maybe iOS 5, somewhere around there. And that is staying put as it is. And with that one, with your agents, obviously that one is required where the user needs to go to the App Store, download the MDM style agent before they start, and then enroll their device. However, there is some big news that Apple has taken a leaf a little bit out of Google's book here and added BYOD enrollment process as well. So this is going to be called user enrollment rather than device enrollment or automated device enrollment, which is a company owned. So the important part here is the ownership scenarios. Obviously, with the automated device enrollment, it is a company owned and controlled device. With device enrolment, it has traditionally also been company owned and perhaps personally enabled. And then with BYO, obviously the end user owns that one. With the BYO enrolment, it's not going to use an agent. It's going to use a web drive-by, if you like, so where you'll go to an enrolment URL page and it will put a profile onto your device to give it the corporate resources that it requires, but it will not require the agent to be installed. So how's this going to be possible is the next section that we're going to jump into here. And it's going to be possible because of a few changes that they've made under the covers. So the first one is that there's going to be a managed Apple ID, and we'll get into that on the next slide, as well as a non-managed Apple ID, if you like. There's some new architecture to do good data separation and to make sure that things are kept where they should be kept. And obviously the changes to the management capabilities that go along with that with your chosen device management platform. So with those 3 things in place, essentially what it allows an Apple device to do is to have 2 Apple IDs resident on the same device. So one can be managed by the business, and that managed app can be used to separate and segment work data and provide per app VPNs and all that sort of goodness. But also having the user have a personal Apple ID that in some cases here, as you'll note, can actually be within the same app. So unlike Android Enterprise, which has 2 Chrome browsers or 2 mail clients, you'll still only have 1 browser or 1 mail client or 1 Notes app, but you'll be able to swap in that app from a personal Apple ID to a managed Apple ID. So that's a pretty cool separation, very, as you'd expect from Apple, a very slick way of doing it, and seems to be a fantastic user experience. So step 2, as we talked about, was then we need to have additional management controls around this so that we can separate the data. And if we look from right to left here, obviously we talked about that the automated device enrolment process is something that's owned by the company. And it can control everything on the device as it should because it's a company-owned asset. However, previously the device enrolment process also had that overreaching, if you like, control and management for it. You could opt not to manage these things and not to report on these things, but essentially the agent that was living on the iOS device could see these things. So with the new user enrollment process, you see here a bunch of green crosses. That's not something that you see too often on a slide. Normally it is that you see red crosses. But a green cross in this case actually denotes that this is a good thing, that the profile can't see it. So there is no real reason for a management profile to see your unique device ID or to be able to do a complex passcode or clear or reset the device, because it is a person's device. But it should be able to enforce certain restrictions to help you as a business to be more comfortable with it. So taking over personal and management of personal apps was something that was possible before and won't be possible under a BYOD scenario. So that is, if it is your dating app, it remains your dating app. It doesn't ever go into a corporate Apple ID. It doesn't ever have any management or even any ability to see which version of it is that you're on and things like that. So you can't query the information about it, but we can likewise query the information about the managed apps to make sure that our users are on the right version and things like that. Continuing on with this one, obviously more green crosses and some green ticks. The access to cellular, to selectively wipe, things are all obviously made available. The big one to take away here is that you can require a passcode with the user enrollment, because we want to enforce encryption and make sure that the device is locked and things like that. But you can only enforce up to a 6-digit passcode. So you can't actually take someone's BYOD device, enforce a complex 12-character passcode on it, and make them feel like now they're working for you, that they've got a dodgy phone that's too hard to log in and out of. So Apple have really thought about it, from the user's perspective, which is the way they approach most of these problems, to make sure that we're providing a good balance of user experience as well as a good business experience to protect corporate data. So the third part of it was how do we segment things and what have you, and it's about having a managed Apple ID for this user enrollment process. So as most of the world is migrating to Azure AD, Apple is actually putting this in place, and this actually exists today for schools, but more so now expanding this to the enterprise, where your Azure identity and account will be linked to the Apple Business Manager service, and that will create your Apple account essentially. That managed account can then be a bucket of data for the organization to manage, so that when someone leaves, what happens to the files that may be stored in the iCloud Drive or in the iCloud Notes or the contacts and calendar. Presumably they're backed up generally from Office 365 point of view, but they are a managed resource, so it's not under a personal Apple ID. And some of the things that we're looking forward to, that we're still working through with Apple on, what exactly this is going to look like, and I will caution the under construction sticker on the side there, because this is still not fully formed up. But the idea that something we see as a business is migrating from Apple to Apple. So I've got an Apple 6 and I'll go to an Apple 10, and I need to back up my device and restore my device. There are third-party solutions to do that, but to put it bluntly, they're all pretty rubbish. The best way of doing it is the iCloud backup and restore. So, and that generally causes a challenge of, now I've got to pay $1.49 for my personal iCloud. I've got to do a reimbursement claim because I don't want to pay that $1.49, so on and so forth. So making it a managed iCloud service, we're looking forward to seeing how that's going to work for Apple backup and restore of devices, to move from A to B, because it does happen if you break a device, if you lose a device, if you just get given a new device. So that's something that's under construction that we're really looking forward to seeing. With iOS 13, iPad OS arrives. So it's not going to be iPad OS 13 as we understand it. It is going to be iPad OS, but it is the breakaway of the iPad operating system from the iOS operating system. So this is where the OS over time will start to mimic, I guess, more Mac-like and desktop-like behaviors. And as we've seen in the latest incarnation of the iPad Pros with USB-C, we can now plug things into them. We can make them operate as a second screen and things like that. So we're looking forward to seeing how iPad OS actually moves on as time goes on as well. So the gotchas for that one that we need to be worried about is that, or the first part is there is no device management changes during this release. So it's still performed with the same complexities and management profiles that are in place today, so you can keep all your policies as are. But however, the the iPad OS will report as being a Mac. So if you have websites, if you have apps and things of that nature that have using the HTML rendering that is detected via detecting it is an iPad, that changes. So you will need to test those out in your business and make sure that you're not getting wonky-donkey formatting of your perhaps web-optimized experience that you're expecting an iPad to deliver. It will be reporting as a Mac. As I mentioned earlier on, Apple are actually doubling down a little bit on the automated device enrollment program, formerly known as DEP. And some of the restrictions that you used to be able to put in place on a device enrollment, so the standard enrollment that we've had for many years, was that you could actually put it into a supervised mode, even if it wasn't part of the device enrollment program. You won't be able to do that moving forward. So that doesn't mean anything is going to break, but it means if a device comes back in from the field and gets reset, you will not be able to reapply iCloud backup restriction or explicit content restriction as an example to a device enrollment device. It will need to be moved over to what was known as DEP to have those policies enabled. So thinking about that moving forward, how is your business going to deal with that is something we would urge you to have a bit of a look at, to say that those policies, if you're using those in place, will only be available if you're in part of the automated device enrollment program. There's some new options that get added as well as moving things from one bucket to another. Obviously, adding WPA3 is a good thing because WPA3 has got to be much better than WPA2. In light technical terms, it's a higher level of encryption at 128-bit and gives you new exchange. So if that's part of your corporate policy, you should be happy to see that one. There's some new restrictions being added to allow or to block, Find My Friends and Find My iPhone and things to that nature. And modify whether Wi-Fi is on or off is something we've been asked for many, many times. It hasn't been a toggle switch that's been available before, and we're looking forward to that one. Into the mundane but important, a enrollment process with an Apple device very much today is very much an Apple process, and the terms and conditions that are presented feel very Apple-like. There's going to be the ability to customize those screens to potentially add your logo and your privacy policy. Now, that doesn't mean that your people are going to read those things, but they may. You've got a higher chance of actually getting them to read your policy if it's got your logo and your summation of that privacy policy. So looking forward to seeing how that's going to operate as we move forward. And then for the apps, the EMM, MDM, UEM, as it's now called, Unified Endpoint Management vendors, have been building out many advanced technologies over the last few years for tunneling applications, for doing single sign-on of applications, of passing credentials. Apple's taking a little bit more of a front seat with iOS 13 moving forward and presenting that so that we can present better credentials and better sign-in experiences for the user direct from the OS and the management technologies rather than from third parties. So looking forward to see how that matures as we move into iOS 13 as well. App distribution is a little bit of a shuffle point, I guess, is probably the way we'd best describe this. And traditionally, we've looked at that apps that were developed personally were put into the MDM app store, if you like, so into the VMware AirWatch platform or the Mobiline platform or Intune or what have you, and distributed from there. Moving forward, Apple really want to bring forward their business app store. So this is using the Apple Content Delivery Network. This is using the Apple App Store security processes and things like that, and getting it to distribute through that mechanism, but still a private app store for you. So we think that's quite a good one. The other one they've made as change in the app process is an internal app now doesn't have to be re-signed every 12 months, which is excellent news for app developers. And certainly many customers have faced that where the app hasn't been re-signed after 12 months. And suddenly the app doesn't function on the device, and there's a bit of a mad scramble to get it resubmitted, re-signed, redeployed, all that sort of good stuff. So the concept here is that we're going to move to the Apple framework for distributing apps. Apple are opening up a little bit more their seed program. So this is something that at Mobile Mentor we've been part of for many years, and was only available through a referral if you're a UEM vendor and things like that. But now as a customer, you need to just have an Apple Business Manager account, and you'll sign in with that account at appleseed.apple.com and go through the process. You'll be able to submit feedback, get better access to the betas. And most importantly here is that customer feedback is prioritized over carrier feedback, over UEM vendors, over us as a managed service partner and things like that. So if you're seeing issues, be part of this program and get on board with Apple Seed. So that's about it for the Apple stuff. Just to finish out this, we're at 17 minutes in. We're going to get it done in 20. For those of you who don't know, Mobile Mentor is the culmination of develop, secure, and manage. So we do have a development business that focuses on making sure that we're developing your apps on the best platform that you need it for. So is it on iOS, as we've talked about today? Does it need to reside on Windows or on Android? Once you've got that process and that app, how do you distribute and secure it? So do you use the Microsoft Enterprise Mobility Suite and Intune, Mobiline and VMware AirWatch as three of the leaders in this space? How do we distribute that app, make sure it's secured, make sure it's got a tunnel, make sure it's got a great user experience and things like that? And then finally, how do we manage that in a 24/7 sense? So when the person rings up and says the app's not functioning, the device, I've lost it, my security warning says this, whatever it may be, how do we manage those operations? So bringing together those three things is what Mobile Mentor is all about in the middle. So from there, at 18 minutes in, I said it was going to be a short, surefire update for you, and I don't want to keep you on this forever. So we'll jump into some Q&A.